Two men who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing spider talk, the amazing spider talk. Come swing through the air, sit back and prepare for the amazing spider
Hello, everyone. It is I, Dapper Dan Gavosden. I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which I think definitely count.
Well, there, Dan. It is I, mischievous Mark Shinakio. I also own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but, you can change creative teams and status quos and replace Spider-Man with whoever, but you know what? The annuals still don't count, Dan.
Well, I'm glad that that will be consistent moving into a new era. Yes, because today we're here to have a kind of casual conversation, a bit unformed. Mark and I actually haven't even talked about this really between each other than the tweet here or there. We're going to be discussing today the announcement from, I guess a few days back. So we've had a few days to process it, that we are, in fact, at the end of the Nick Spencer run, and we are moving into what seems to be like Spider-Man Brain Trust round 2 with a whole new group of writers. So far, we know who the writers are and one of the artists. So what we know is that we have a Spider-Man team that seems to have been started by Zeb Wells, as if Zeb Wells was going to be the replacement for Nick Spencer. Zeb, who's taken a few years off comics and done a few things here and there, and was an original part of the past Brand New Day Brain Trust of Spider-Man writers. But it seems that his idea grew in such a manner that Nick Spencer was convinced to, not Nick Spencer, Nick Lowe, editor Nick Lowe was convinced to expand the roster to include writers Kelly Thompson, those who might have read her current ongoing Captain Marvel series, Saladin Ahmed, who is doing the Miles Morales book currently, Cody Ziglar, who is a new writer to Marvel. He's done like a couple books here and there, but he's mostly famous. He wrote on the She-Hulk TV show that's coming out on Disney Plus, and Rick and Morty, bringing in that television personality, which we also had people from film and TV during the last Brand New Day creative, roster. And Patrick Gleason, who's the artist we've all become familiar with, is not just doing art and did all the artwork on this announcement. He is also writing on the title. So that's the currently announced team, which is taking over for an Amazing Spider-Man 75, with the big announcement being this thing called Spider-Man Beyond, and the Beyond Corporation presenting this new book where Ben Reilly apparently is going to return to take back the mantle of Spider-Man. We know a few more details here and there, but reaction on the internet was mixed. I know in my comic shop, the people working there were like pretty ho-hum about this. I know a lot of fans of Ben Reilly were pretty thrilled about it. And today, Mark and I are going to kind of react to this news. It's not every day that you get a new creative team or even something like this, like a roster of people taking over the book. So I think there's many avenues that we could talk about this, Mark. I think let's just start off first with like initial reactions.
So there's a couple of things that strike me. I mean, let's talk about let's talk about the creative team first, and just the format of the comic before we start talking about the plot points, if you don't mind. And if you mentioned this already, I apologize. But as part of the whole Brain Trust thing, in addition to this rotating crew of creators, is we're going back to 3 times a month, which I think can be a cool thing. I have a pretty big concern, Dad. We've been kind of privately called out for sometimes being a little too harsh on the current editorial team working on Spider-Man. But, when the last time Marvel did the Brain Trust and they went to thrice monthly, this was considered a gargantuan task, a logistical challenge to say the least. Everything was hanging by a thread, and the guy that they brought in to do it was Stephen Wacker, who had proven he had the editorial chops to do this by producing a 52 issue weekly series for DC called 52, which tied all these threads together. I mean, Wacker made his name in the industry doing 52. So him coming to Spider-Man to do Brand New Day and to manage this orchestra of talent and creativity 3 times a month, while still considered a huge risk, at least the pilot had the track record of flying the plane. This is not that. And this has me concerned because, whether you want to pin some of the issues with Spider-Man over the last few years at the feet of Nick Lowe and his team or not, there are some consistent things. The comics, I think, have consistently had errors and typographical issues in them. There's been continuity issues. It seems like people aren't talking to each other, which is just going to be essential for a team of authors like this. You need communication, you need consistency, you need accuracy, because there's just going to be a lot of variables that can throw this thing off the rails before you even get to the kinds of stories you're telling. That news from the onset made me nervous. I'm like, okay, this isn't Wacker. How is this can Lowe do this? And I don't know if he can. So that's a definite wait and see kind of thing for me. With all that said, I think the roster of people that they brought on is really cool. I think it's a diverse mix of writers here. I love that they're going to have Gleason writing. I think Zeb Wells, to me, was one of the highlights of Brand New Day when he was doing it. I enjoy his stuff. I don't know how great he is at deadlines, so I'll be curious how much he does with that, because I always feel like Zeb is one of those guys they kind of bring him on and he can do an arc here and there, but he can't really do something consistently all the way through. Certainly Kelly Thompson is going to be an interesting, and hey, a woman writing Spider-Man consistently. Huzzah. Saladin Ahmed, I think, his Miles book is really taken on a life of its own since he took over for Bendis. So, a lot to be excited about from a talent perspective, but the logistical stuff, I got to be honest, scares the crap out of me.
I feel like I'm operating in a similar realm for you. I honestly think that the rotating group of creators, if Spider-Man needs to be twice a month or 3 times a month, which it seems like it needs to, because, this is a business and Spider-Man is one of their top selling titles. And, and it's shipping twice or 3 times a month, it's keeping a lot of Marvel's comics work afloat. All the books you love that don't sell are allowed to exist because Spider-Man does. So let's just take that as a given. Spider-Man will sell, needs to sell, and needs to come out with some frequency. And let's be honest, we are at literally the end of year 3 with Nick Spencer. We're going to get 75 issues out of him, not including the point ones. The guy has kind of been writing this book 3 times a month. Not always, but even then, if you take away the months from the pandemic that were lost, he has been, busting his butt to get this book out regularly. And I just don't think that that's a job for one person, and I'm going to be I'm not going to be on the other side of this in you, because I am very nervous about the editorial team managing this. But if having more writers allows them the time to not have to push people about deadlines and do all that work, because that's the one thing I remember from the time when I was an editor, is so much of it is just deadlines, push. If they can use the extra writers to spend more time crafting the story, bringing back the letters pages, whatever it is they need to do to bring this book and its community alive again, I hope that time is spent in that way, because it seems like we're going to ostensibly get almost the same number of books as we're getting now, just with a team of 5 people. I can't help but think that that's going to help push the boulder up the hill a little bit easier. I think in terms of health for the book, I think this is a net positive. And I always think more people is good, because people are always going to be there to provide feedback on other people's stuff and work together as a team. And I really think, like, looking at Nick Spencer's book, it really feels like a guy that got like a little bit like stuck in his own universe, you know, and isn't seeing what's going on around it. So that has me excited.
And you could say the same for Dan Slott's run. I mean, coming out of Brand New Day, I mean, like, you know, I feel like sometimes people kind of glom Brand New Day to Slott because he was part of that brain trust. And yeah, he did write a lot of key stories during that run, but like, you know, that run was also about Zeb Wells. It was also about Mark Waid. It was also, I mean, there was a ton of really super talented people, just like this one, with people who kind of, you know, Joe Kelly, Mark Guggenheim. I mean, you know, they made their mark on other stuff, but kind of bringing them together into the symphony of Spider-Man, I think just benefited the book. And I like having different perspectives. I know the traditional way of comics is, you know, here's your writer, here's your artist, they work Marvel style or whatever, and magic is made. And, you know, you talk about the Claremont Byrne run, or you talk about Kirby and Lee, or you talk about Ditko and Lee, but you don't talk about, you know, 7 or 8 people behind the comic. But like, I think in this day and age and the way we consume, I mean, look at TV. I mean, most TV that we love is not solely managed by 1 or 2 people. It's a team. It's a team of writers. It's a team of directors. It's a team of, you know, of cinematographers. I mean, you know, it's you know, you have multiple perspectives. I think having more diversity and inclusivity in the creative process only generates better content at the end. So like, that doesn't concern me. You know, again, my biggest issue is just like, from a mechanical, logistical standpoint, can this be managed successfully by the people who are currently managing this book? Because, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. Like, this book has been kind of like unofficially been almost 3 times a month anyway now for the better part of the last year or so. But frankly, there's been a lot of errors and mistakes in the book over the last year. And you're just like, I mean, you know, maybe that happened a lot under Brand New Day, under Wacker, but we just didn't realize it because we liked the content better. Maybe, I don't know, but like, I just feel like, you know, again, Wacker, not only did he prove himself on Spider-Man, he proved himself doing this in other, you know, with the distinguished competition. So like, it just kind of it made you feel more confident about the process when he was doing it. That's all.
And I want to acknowledge, because I think a lot of people are going to push back and be like, I didn't love Brand New Day in the same way, or Brand New Day wasn't perfect. Like, I really think the first year of Brand New Day was a bit rough. You know, like, we got our freak story, we got our jackpot stories, like those things were rough. But it was like, and the characterization of Peter could be a little all over the map based on the different writers who handled it. But it was the feeling of like freshness and new, or the brand new day of it all, that I think actually made it all sing well together ultimately in the end. And once they found their footing. And again, I don't expect this to like really work right out of the gate. You know, people find like how they work as a team together. But I just think inherently 5 people working on writing instead of 1, like, is going to be way better in terms of like giving people the time and energy and room to come up with good stories. You know, if you've only got like a shot at a story once or twice per year, damn it, you better make it something that's worth reading, especially if there's going to be like a cool hook over it all. I want to also acknowledge, beyond there being a female writer for the first time on Amazing Spider-Man, and a really great one that I've been championing for a long time to take over this book. You know, if it wasn't going to be Donny Cates, you know, Kelly Thompson, you know, was probably my number 2. And if you haven't read any of her stuff, I would recommend her Jessica Jones books, where actually Spider-Man and Mary Jane play a rather key role. She actually kills Mary Jane off in her book and brings her back to life, but it's handled so thoughtfully and the characters really sing on the pages. I'm excited to see her approach to it. But I also wanted to point out, like, Saladin Ahmed, you know, this is a title that's been dominated by white male writers. I mean, yeah, you've got your, you know, Christopher Priest and stuff like that, but it's very infrequent. I mean, I would be hard pressed to come up with really anybody beyond Christopher Priest and the few issues he did, on this title. So having like a Muslim man writing this book could really bring an interesting perspective to it and New York. And I think you see that in the Miles Morales book, which I do think has been pretty entertaining, especially in this latest Clone Saga stuff. I'm excited. I thought it was weird that the story that they chose to promote Zeb Wells on the back of was Shed. Not a fan favorite from a lot of people, but has turned out to be more consequential, I think, than a lot of other stories from that era. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have a separate announcement where they announce all the different artists on this. I'm crossing my fingers for JRJR. I mean, we don't know what book JRJR is working on yet. To me, it would seem very strange to not like announce, if you're going to really blow this thing out, you want to put JRJR on a book like this. I think that would be awesome. And the artwork from Patrick Gleason that we've already received, including the design stuff and the little teases and that full page of like Ben Reilly on the ceiling, all of it looks beautiful. I mean, that new costume is really rad. Like combining the two different Scarlet Spider suits into one with the offset spider, but with the, the kind of unlimited stuff and also the superior shoulders. It's just kind of like a best of Spider-Man costume. I don't know. I mean, yeah, editorial always has me eternally worried, but I think on the creative side, I think we're in a really great place here. So that's kind of exciting for me.
Cool. So with that said, let's talk about the pitch, the elevator pitch, because I know we talked about this a lot in our 300th episode. Me specifically, am I being too cranky and cynical about stuff? I like that we preface this by saying, like, or at least I preface this. I know you agree probably even more than I do on this, that, I'm excited about the creators, but like, if you follow me on Twitter, you can tell pretty quickly, I am not terribly stoked about this premise. Like you said, there is this new corporation, the Beyond Corporation, and I guess Spider-Man is going to be working for the Beyond Corporation. Is that what you gathered from the pitch as well, Dan, or am I jumping to conclusions here?
Yeah, I had not heard of Beyond Corporation before, but apparently it's a thing that exists previously in the Marvel Universe, and it involves the multiverse. I don't really know. I want to preface all of this by giving a shout out to Alan Scherzel in our 300th episode, who had no knowledge of this and asked us, how would we feel, or would we keep reading if Peter Parker was inevitably replaced by someone else for a long period of time? And we don't know for certain that that's what's happening here, although it seems like it is.
That's how they're trying to market it, it seems,
Yeah. So yeah, there's this like Beyond Corporation, and there's something that calls like they describe it as like, but here's the exact quote from editor Nick Lowe. The whole point of working on Spider-Man is trying to put new unliftable weights on top of him. Physical, metaphysical, emotional, psychological, and seeing if he can lift them. But what if that weight is truly too heavy? What if someone with the exact same skills in formative years could do better? Ben Reilly is back. And with Aunt May and Uncle Ben's lessons in the back of his mind as well, he's here to step in where Peter Parker failed. Can he accomplish things the original Spider-Man never could? These questions are what sold me on this story. And my read on just reading that quote is like, didn't we already do that in Superior Spider-Man?
That is definitely the first big question here. I mean, like, let's putting aside who is replacing Peter, if Peter is indeed being replaced. Like, and I think we said as much when Alan asked us about this. I mean, like, look, I'm not going to sit here and act like, my precious Peter Parker, my precious Spider-Man, don't touch him. Like whatever. If it tells good story, like Superior did, at least Superior did for the vast majority of its run, that doesn't bother me. But like, it does feel in relative terms a little too close in time to the last time they did this. So it kind of like, just off the top of my head, it feels a little unoriginal and uninspired to be taking Peter out of the book again after only having done it 8 years ago.
And with the premise that it's like Ben Reilly has not been an active part of Spider-Man, like it just seems completely out of left field. And I'll say this, like I was talking on the Slack and people were asking me like, well, what would you want to see in a new run, or what wouldn't you want to see in a new run? And I actually really am kind of loath. I kind of loathe these runs, the modern Marvel, where it's like someone new comes on and it completely ignores like what was going on to take it in a wildly different direction, and sometimes that works. Like I think about something like the Immortal Hulk, right? Except that wasn't really a radical new direction. Like Hulk was dead, and we've had the whole Hulk is a different person at night thing and different personality. Like it was just building on the lore. And this might be that. Like we don't know how Spencer's run is going to conclude. This might actually be like a logical playthrough. But right now it just seems kind of like a gimmick. Like, hey, like we're bringing this character back from out of nowhere, like, and we're changing the direction of this book radically. And I was thinking, like, who is the last real creator to come onto this title and not like radically shift the status quo, like a new season of television or something? And it's probably like goes all the way back to like the late 200s issues, and the changeover. I know that, oh my God, why am I forgetting his name right now?
Oh, David Michelinie.
David Michelinie, right? David Michelinie came into the book and married off Peter and MJ. And that might have been a big status quo, but we were really working there, for a long time. But JMS came in and introduced this like crazy new wrinkle. We had Brand New Day was started by a crazy new wrinkle. Dan Slott introduced Big Time, which I guess was kind of a natural offset, but it was a really big change. And each of his volumes was like a radical shift, whether it's, Dr. Octopus or Peter owning a company or something like that. I miss the era of like the transition from like Stern to Friends and DeFalco, where, it just continues that story naturally. And I can't help but like see this as like not the story I'm currently reading.
That's definitely an element in all of this that kind of makes me skeptical a little bit. I mean, it just seems like you said, like, even if Spencer finds a way to dovetail with this story, it's not going to feel organic, because where the hell has Ben Reilly been for the last how many years? You know what I mean? Like, we really haven't had it. So, but like, to me, that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room right now, which is Ben Reilly. Like, okay, so Ben Reilly of the Clone Saga, this we've done this before with him, where he took over for Peter while Peter went off into the sunset in the 90s, only to be brought back because, depending on whose version of history, they were going to bring him back all along anyway. But in reality, it was just because the book wasn't selling with Ben, whatever, whoever you want to believe. Ben Reilly was not long for the world of being the main character, was killed off. And then it seemed like, as time, when he was killed, it was like, yay, the Clone Saga is over. People celebrated. It was like, the Ewoks in the streets of Endor. I feel like as time went on, it was like, no, we got to bring Ben back. We got to bring Ben back. And we brought Kane back, but now let's bring Ben back and Ben. And we finally brought Ben back in the Clone Conspiracy. And like the character was just completely different and unrecognizable and frankly dumb. So my issue is twofold. It's like, okay, so which version of Ben Reilly are we going to get? Are we going to get the Ben Reilly that has already had a go at this and failed, which might be the more popular Ben Reilly, but not really? I mean, popular in a cult sense. Or are we going to get this new Ben Reilly, which to me is a completely undesirable character? Like, I have no interest in anti-hero Spider-Man. Again, on the heels of Superior. I mean, we had that for Superior, like the Spider-Man who's a villain, who's going to redeem himself by being Spider-Man.
Let me cut in here. And Mark, I don't know if you remember, but at the end of Spider-Geddon, Ben like sacrificed himself and died, and Otto resurrected him, and it reset him back to like factory standards. So he's not actually suffered through all of those deaths. So we are ostensibly, I think, getting the Ben Reilly from, the 90s.
Which then brings me back to, so it's still so what? Like, we did this character before. What is his defining characteristic? Blonde hair? I mean, like, no connection to the supporting cast, which is another one of the big gimmicks of Spider-Man. And, again, like I have said on multiple occasions that I have no desire to be a creator. I have no desire to rewrite Spider-Man in the way I want it written. But like, I got to just put this out there. I put it out there on Twitter. And I think you've even responded to this, at least privately to me, Dan, which is like, if you're going to replace Peter as Spider-Man in the year 2021, Miles Morales is right there. Miles Morales was the star of a movie that won an Oscar. He's doing video games. He is a successful brand in his own right. He has a fan base. He's a diverse character that a whole generation of fans can relate to in a different way. Like, why the hell are you going to replace Peter Parker with the clone from the 90s? Like, who is legitimately asking for that? I just, like, to me, it is just like I don't want to say a bankrupt idea because that's way too harsh, but like, to me, it's a terrible elevator pitch. I don't understand what I'm supposed to be excited about with Ben Reilly. And I legitimately forgot how Spider-Gambit ended because I did not care for that story. I just remember the Peter David series and, where he was kind of like an anti-hero trying to redeem himself, sort of. I had no interest in that character either. But it's like, what story do you have to tell with Ben's character in 2021 that wasn't already told in the 90s? Like where can you go with this character now? Like, the character, to me, his book is closed. And I know, like, someone said to me, who was arguing with me when I made that point, they're like, well, why are we still telling Peter's story after 60 years? I'm like, because he's been going for 60 years. He's endured. That's the thing. Like, Ben Reilly was introduced and then killed. And in a very final, it seems in a very final, resolute way, not in a like, oh, we don't know what to do with this character anymore, let's just kill him. Like, the Clone Saga went well beyond its scope in terms of where it should have logically ended. So like, they had to end it. So that I just don't get why they think this is the story that needs to be told right now, especially with Miles right there. Like, I have never been one to champion Miles as becoming the new Amazing Spider-Man, but like, if you're going to do this, it should be Miles. Like, I feel like legitimately offended that it's not Miles, because it's like, what else does Miles have to do to become the main Spider-Man then in this universe if this is not the opportunity to do it?
I agree with all of that. I think that these writers have an uphill battle to convince us that whatever themes they want to tackle are best tackled by, the character of Ben Reilly. I mean, I've legitimately been thinking, like, what are the things that Ben allows us to like really investigate and that haven't been investigated? Like, Ben is Peter Parker from a certain point, I guess, from issue, the original one, the Jerry Conway Clone Saga issues. He is Peter Parker, and then he had a different life, which we've explored and things like that. Like, what did that life bring to him that would allow him to stand up? And I have to think, like, and this to me is the real elephant in the room, is it seems like Peter and MJ are, headed towards a reckoning with one more day, whether that reinstates their marriage or whatever. I mean, we had that Spider-Man, The Final Adventure story, which saw them move into Portland to retire and let Ben, continue, on it. Like, this could be that story that we never got, right? Like, the teaser art shows like what looks like a dead Peter, fatal consequences, which are teased in the press release of this. Like, do I think they're going to kill off Peter Parker? Maybe not. I hate to say this because I actually think it makes the title sound really lame. Like, there could be like a Batman Beyond kind of thing here where Peter is in some way incapacitated, or because of family ties, he's not able to act like Spider-Man in the same way. And so Ben has to step up and step in, and we're investigating like the whole, like, what does it mean to have like friends and family that are being hurt by you being Spider-Man? But I feel like we've already investigated all that. Like, even Nick Spencer is investigating that now. Like, he got Mary Jane to step up and say, I'm okay with all this. So I really don't see how we're going to get there. And I think these writers are all very smart people. So I have like faith that they could convince me, but it's going to be an uphill battle because you're right. Like the Miles story is right there, or just telling more Peter stories. Like, why can't we tell Peter stories? Like, are we at the point where we are surrendering to the idea that we can't tell stories with Peter that are like compelling because he's in persistent arrested development? I don't know, but I also don't know how Spencer's run is going to end. And that could really determine a lot of this. So, but I mean, if it is him like moving to Portland while Ben takes over, I also feel like the stories move past that in the pages of Nick Spencer's comic. So that doesn't even make sense to me. Yeah, but I think the big thing, Mark, is this pitch does nothing to me. It could be the best story ever, and there could be the most confident, but everything they wrote in this press release, like, does not actually tell me anything that makes me go, oh, like that's a story that I've been compelled to be a part of.
To me, the draw is clearly the creative team and going back to 3 times a month and getting maximum Spider-Man. That to me is going to be where the curiosity lies. Like how are these moving pieces going to interact? It's essential to my overall enjoyment of this comic book for it to be a good story. And I don't know if this premise is going to be able to deliver that. I mean, I have an open mind. I don't want to say I don't, but like, like you're saying, the pitch itself does not get me excited to read the story. I'm excited to see what this creative team can do, but like, I'll be completely blunt. I have zero interest in a Ben Reilly story in 2021. Just zero. I don't care. It's going to be a monumental task to get me to care about Ben Reilly right now. And for people that love Ben Reilly and love the Clone Saga, God bless. I mean, like to me, I lived the Clone Saga in real time. It almost killed my interest in comics. In fact, it kind of did kill my interest in comics. I didn't come back to comics full time until the Clone Saga was long in the rearview mirror. I hate to be this way, but like, I'm not in the minority on that standpoint. I think the people who think this is like great fodder are the minority. So we're catering to a very niche section of the fan base here in this pitch. So they got a lot of work cut out for them to make this interesting to people, I think.
I also think if they end up marrying off Peter Parker by the end of Nick Spencer run, or like undoing One More Day only to kill Peter or send him off to pasture, you're going to piss off Spider-Man fans in a way. I don't know. I dare say more than One More Day. But I think that's like maybe the kind of slap in the face to a group of people that are already, built up expectations in a certain way and have been begging for something for a long time. Like for you to give it to them and immediately take it away from them. Like I think about like the start of like the Alien 3 movie where like, Ripley finally got everybody away in Aliens. And then that movie starts with all of the characters dying. And it's like, well, then why can I ever get invested in this ever again? If, that's the attitude you're going to have like towards any game. And I like Alien 3. So don't make me get on that soapbox. But, again, we have yet to see. Like, again, I don't want to prejudge this because it could end up being amazing. And I think there were a lot of voices that felt the way that we're talking about right now about Superior before it started. And our show was built on the back of our love of Superior. I think maybe like color me skeptical going into this, but buoyed with the optimism that this creative team and this kind of working assembly could mean for the book. Because I think if anything, the past 10 years have proven it's time to shake things up a little bit.
I mean, it's funny. You mentioned Superior and the initial fan reaction. I mean, I am almost embarrassed to admit, but you can go back into the archives of Chasing Amazing and you can see a piece that I wrote well in advance of like Amazing Spider-Man 698 and, my very large skepticism for what Superior was supposed to be, before the details came forward. But what I will say is what Superior had going for it was frankly a build to Superior from Dan Slott that really caught my imagination, which was, that issue 698 and 699 and 700. Again, like kind of going into what are the challenges of pulling this off. We talked about editorial. We talked about the premise being a little loosey goosey. The other elephant in the room is like is Nick Spencer the kind of writer to, land this plane and put it in a place that can transition to this new status quo in a way that makes sense? And I don't know if he is, because what I've witnessed from Nick so far is, as you mentioned earlier in the show, is kind of a bit of obliviousness sometimes when it comes to how he weaves Spider-Man lore and history. I think he likes what he likes, and he wants to tell the story that he wants to tell. And, I don't know if he is quite good at rearranging the toys or the chairs or whatever analogy you want to make to get to the next run. So that is, I think, frankly, another major challenge this all has going for it, is like Spencer's got to find a way to transition into this thing in a way that will get people excited, and certainly, spending 4 issues going over the Chameleon conspiracy, as we talked about in our other recent Patreon episodes, is not the way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's as good a place as any to bring this to a close. We're going to get our first glimpse at the Spider-Man Beyond on August 14th in that free comic book day 2021 Spider-Man/Venom book, which probably seems to be setting up maybe the status quo for both of these new runs. Mark and I will be here to cover it. So, stay tuned. Boy, Mark, we're going to have our work cut out for us 3 times a month now. Oh boy, here we go. And a new era for Spider Talk as well. Well, anyway, Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this. And we'd love to know what you think about this new run. Hit us up on Twitter or, send us an email at amazingspidertalk@gmail.com and tell us how wrong we are for being somewhat critical of this, and how great it is that Ben Reilly is back.
You got it. With great podcasts, Dan, there must also come a new status quo and amazing Spider Talk.